Immaculately styled, obsessively engineered and outrageously potent, the DBS Superleggera claims to be every inch the Aston Martin flagship. We're here to decide whether it's a truly credible expression of everything an ultimate Aston Martin sports car should stand for. At launch in 2018, it was billed as the fastest and most powerful road car the brand had ever built, and we're going to test it.
What might the ultimate Aston Martin be like? Well, the answer, we're told, lies right here with this car, the DBS Superleggera. This, the flagship sports car in Aston Martin's mainstream range, is a thoroughbred, large-capacity, front-engined V12 Super GT, with badging that marks the return of two illustrious names. The Superleggera, or Super Lightweight tag, apparently pays homage to the innovative lightweight construction methods pioneered by Italian coachbuilder Touring, with classic DB models of the 60s. As for DBS, well, that nameplate's been around since 1967 and was last used on the 2007 era model that Daniel Craig barrel-rolled in his Casino Royale James Bond debut. The positioning of that previous 007-inspired DBS was rather confused. Some thought it was a replacement for the 2004 Vanquish, others that it was merely a faster version of either the DB9 or the short-lived Virage model. This time around, this DBS Superleggera's placement in the company's lineup is supposed to be clearer. It's positioned just below the Valkyrie hypercar at the pinnacle of the Aston Martin range, is available in both this coupe and a Volante convertible, and targets Super GT models with around 800 horsepower. Well, one in particular actually, the Ferrari 812 Superfast. Below this DBS in the brand's model lineup, there seems like a big gap, both in power and price, down to the company's more laid-back DB11, which these days is mainly V8 powered. In time, there won't be. Aston plans a new era mid-engined Vanquish model to fill this space in the range, a car which will target more track-focused 700 horsepower sports cars like the Ferrari 488 and the McLaren 720S. For the time being, this gap in the range is being plugged with a top 630 horsepower AMR version of the DB11, the only version of that car to feature Aston's own V12 engine. That power plant also features in this DBS, though naturally with a lot more power and torque, 715 horsepower and 900 newton meters to be exact. In addition, this Superleggera is 72 kilos lighter than the DB11 AMR, courtesy of the carbon fibre panels that coat its aluminium structure. And it offers a higher level of downforce than any of the brand's previous series production models have ever generated. All of which means that this car's performance can be concussive, just like its Ferrari 812 Superfast rival. The difference is, though, that unlike that Maranello model, this DBS is at home on the M4 as it is at Monza. This car really can be both a GT and a race refugee. It'll really be quite unique. Let's put it to the test. Building a track-focused super sports car is one thing. Building a super powerful Grand Touring GT sports coupe is another. Can the two genres really be combined? Well, Super GT sports cars like this one reckon they can. In 2018, two models were launched claiming to epitomise what a large-capacity front-engine Super Grand Tourer of this sort should be. One was a car from Ferrari, the 812 Superfast, and this, the Aston Martin DBS Superleggera, was the other. Both use classic V12s. In the Aston's case, the 5.2-litre power plant we've already seen in the DB11 AMR, though here tuned to quite a different level, possessed of 715 braked horses. As we'll see, this engine is fettled quite differently from the 6.5-litre unit featuring in that rival Ferrari, but the stats suggest the same kind of concussive speed to be in prospect. We'll get to that after we've enjoyed something Aston Martin does better than any other brand. The unique sonic signature you get once you push the big crystal button in the middle of the dash and start her up. A long stab on the button gets you the quiet start feature that'll fire the engine without disturbing the neighbours. A quick push though, like this, gets you the full fat fireworks, embellished here by the implementation of a quad exhaust system, one of many changes over the DB11 AMR. There are plenty of others, which Aston claims will become very apparent once you hit the road. How to describe the feeling here? Even merely brushing the throttle is enough to release what seems like almost endless thrust towards the horizon. It's all about pulling power, and in this case there's more of it than almost any other car can offer. 900 Newton meters of torque, propelling you forward faster than any mainstream model from Aston Martin has yet managed to go. It's this figure that's more important than the benchmark sprint stats. From rest, 62 miles an hour takes 3.4 seconds and 100 miles an hour is dispatched in 6.4. Both those readings are bettered by that rival Ferrari, but as you might expect, they would be, given that an 812 Superfast is 75 horsepower more powerful and 168 kilos lighter. But for the mid-range figures that matter, the pendulum swings back to favour the DBS. From 30 to 70 in fourth gear, from 40 to 80 in fifth, and from 50 to 90 miles an hour in seventh, it's significantly the quicker car of the two. All the way to the 211 mile an hour top speed both models share. We'll leave the Ferrari comparisons there because that velocity figure and the cylinder count really represent the only two areas of common ground between the two cars. Aston told us that they don't consider this DBS Superleggera to be track orientated, which tells you everything because an 812 Superfast absolutely is and has the capacity for frightening feedback if less experienced drivers dare to push up towards its limits. The British brand's Chief of Vehicle Attribute Engineering, Chassis Supremo Matt Becker, was looking for something rather different. We've honed the dynamics, he told us, so that the car is agile and connected, but also linear and progressive as you work towards its limits. Much like we've tuned the engine to deliver the meat of its performance at real-world revs, we've tuned the handling to engage and reward drivers of all ability levels. It's hard to imagine a Ferrari engineer ever being allowed to produce such a package, whereas the Maranello maker developed its Super GT sports car contender from a circuit-focused super sports car perspective. Aston's starting point was to further hone the responses of a grand touring GT sports coupe. Ostensibly the DB11, which shares not only its top engine, but also its aluminium chassis and its 8-speed torque converter ZF Auto gearbox with this DBS Superleggera. The differences in all three areas, though, are pretty significant. For a start, the V12 power plant puts out 85 horsepower more than it does in a DB11 AMR. Then there's the fact that the bonnet, roof and rear deck that clothe that aluminium chassis are fashioned from weight-saving carbon fibre rather than steel. And that auto transmission has a shorter final drive ratio than the box used in the DB11 and is strengthened. Otherwise, all that torque would mash the cogs to bits if you were to engage in repeated smoky getaways. These are aided by software, allowing you to pitch just the right amount of revs and torque into the driveline for the optimum standing start. The other changes needed to evolve the DB11 formula into that created for this DBS Superleggera are equally important. We mentioned that new exhaust. There's also bespoke suspension geometry and a whole range of aero tweaks, including F1 style rear double diffuser that collectively generate more downforce than any other series production Aston has previously offered. 180 kilograms of it at top VMAX speed, split 60-120 front to back. Standard CCB ceramic brakes replace the iron stoppers used on the DB11 and offer a level of retardation that pins you back into the Sports Plus seat with huge carbon discs measuring 410mm at the front and 360 at the rear. And there are larger 21-inch wheels that are broader, 265 section at the front and 305 section at the rear, and shod with stickier Pirelli P0 rubber. On top of that, the track widths are up, 10mm wider at the front and 20mm wider at the rear, so the DBS has a larger footprint than the DB11 AMR, despite the fact that it's 72 kilos lighter. Plus, the chassis sits 5mm lower, the front anti-roll bars being tweaked, and the structure's laterally stiffer, with only 2.6 degrees of roll per G compared with 3.0 degrees for the DB11. That's in the coupe version of this car, though admirably, the alternative open-topped Volante version of this model is almost as rigid, though has to carry around 170 kilos more weight to achieve that result. It's worth pointing out that Aston's entry-level model, the Vantage, is rated at only 2.1 degrees of roll, though the DBS claws back ground lost to that car by using a more responsive mechanical limited slip differential with torque vectoring system to manage the rear axle, rather than relying on a simpler electronic e-diff setup in the way that the Vantage does. Plus, there's the benefit here of an isolated rear subframe. It's fixed in that junior model. The Vantage was the last car developed from scratch by Becker and his team, and in many ways the Superleggera feels more like a bigger, brawnier version of that model than a gutsier DB11. It shares many of the Vantage's key attributes: a beautiful balance, sharp turn-in, superbly feelsome steering, and, to quote Becker again, you don't need to be a hero to get the best from it. The drive settings you can choose here, though, activated as usual by buttons on the steering wheel spokes, are slightly different. Both cars have the same Sport and Sport Plus options for drive mode selection and Skyhook adaptive damping, but whereas the Vantage supplements this with a focused track setting, the DBS Superleggera prefers to retain the same cruisy GT option for both damping and drive mode that's offered by the DB11. Which isn't really an issue because Sport Plus is as close to a circuit spec setup as you'd ever really want, complete with the evocative popping and banging on the overrun you want to hear from such a classic sports car. Most of the time, though, the standard sport settings are sufficient to deliver everything you'd really want for secondary road driving. Grip, on a dry surface anyway, is absolutely immense, aided by the carefully honed DTV, or dynamic torque vectoring system we mentioned, which allows you to fire the car from bend to bend. Corners can be taken a gear higher than you'd think, overtakes are dispatched almost instantly, and the numbers on the digital speedo ramp up to license-threatening levels at every opportunity. You could certainly push this car considerably harder than would ever be possible in a DB11, though you'll never really discover quite by how much, unless you burn a bit of Pirelli rubber on a track day. The greater circumspection required on a public highway means that you'll more typically be appreciating this Aston's other virtues. Or at least you will once you've adapted to a low-slung driving position that obscures many of the car's extremities from view, and a vehicle width that can initially make narrower roads somewhat daunting. In town, it's worse still, and you'll need all the parking aids provided if you're to avoid damage to those expensive carbon fibre panels. You quickly adjust, though, in a way that you never would in, say, an even lower set McLaren or Lamborghini, to the point where a Superleggera could easily function as day-to-day transport were you able to afford its faintly frightening running costs. That being the case, it's disappointing that Aston Martin hasn't bothered with any of the autonomous driving tech or camera-driven safety features that presumably it has access to through its Mercedes shareholder. This puts it at a disadvantage to V12 sports models that we'd see as closer real-world rivals than that 812 superfast Ferrari, contenders like Bentley's Continental GT Speed or the Ferrari GTC4 Lusso. Even something as obvious as adaptive cruise control is missing here, the sort of feature you'd really want when engaging in the kind of cross-continental jaunts that a DBS would take so easily in its stride. Highway driving in this Aston is immensely pleasurable, the experience being luxurious, cosseting, and accompanied by just enough of the V12's muted baritone to reassure you of this car's Super GT credentials. But is it quite different enough from a DB11 to justify its exalted price positioning? Well, possibly not, but if we were buying and committed to Aston Martin ownership, we'd want to find the extra for a Superleggera anyway. There's a special feel here that no other model from the brand manages to quite replicate, creating the kind of GT the old Vanquish always should have been. The result is a car you have to try to understand everything an Aston Martin can be. Not before time, Aston Martin is giving its cars more distinct individual personalities. This one will turn heads like no DB11 or Vantage model ever would, described by stylist Marek Reichman as a brute in a suit. Bulging in all the right places, it's extreme, intimidating, pugnacious and aggressive, which the kind of people who buy cars like this will probably like very much. The Superleggera name was originally used by Touring, the Italian styling studio responsible for the brand's 60s DB4, DB5 and DB6 models. This curvaceous chrome script beside these huge bonnet nostril grills being an exact replica of that used on those classic Astons. And there are more delicious touches. Jewel-like LED headlights, slimmer than those of a DB11, and lower down, this carbon fibre front splitter, which works in unison with the air dam to accelerate airflow beneath the nose of the car, increasing downforce and cooling the front brakes. The company's usual trademark trapezoidal front grille is here traded for a much larger honeycomb-trimmed black intake, flanked by menacing inlets on either side, feeding air to the enormous 5.2-litre V12. You'll want to lift the bonnet, front hinged in classic British sports car style, and take a look at this powerhouse, a glorious anachronism in these days of politically correct electrification. In an era where Aston seems to source almost all its engines from Mercedes, it's refreshing to remember that it still makes some great ones itself. A word about body styles. It's easy to see why you might also be tempted by the charms of the open-topped Volante variant, which features a fabric roof retractable in just 14 seconds. To our eyes, though, this coupe version's swept-back silhouette is difficult to better. In profile, it delivers a dramatically honed physique with emphasised lower side sills and drawn-in flanks that are sculpted to accentuate the muscularity of the broad front shoulders and powerful rear haunches. Under the skin lies basically the same aluminium chassis used by Aston's other models, but what's different here is that almost every body panel that's bolted to it is fashioned from carbon fibre, each one desirably different from anything seen on a DB11 and shrink-wrapped to the lightweight frame. Roof strakes can be added in carbon fibre or, as here, in gloss black, and the same finishes can embellish these slash-cut, open stirrup, curlicue strakes in the front wings. These louvres echo those found on the brand's Vulcan and Vantage GTE race cars, there to allow air to escape and flow more cleanly along the car's flanks. The wheels and brakes are very different from those you'd find in a DB11 too. At 21 inches, the rims are an inch larger than those of that car and are shod with stickier Pirelli P0 rubber with a broader 265 section format at the front, and there's a pair of 305 section tyres at the rear. There's a choice of 3 different 10 twin-spoke forged rim designs available in silver or, as in this case, black. Or you could go for a set of lightweight twin-spoke forged rims with gloss or textured black finishes. Either way, through the wheel spokes you glimpse ceramic discs in place of the DB11 steel ones with calipers that can be painted various colours on request. Black in this case. The rear is characterised by this super slim LED lighting strip, huge twin exhausts at either corner and carbon fibre trimming around the number plate. There's a fixed rear spoiler, this sliver of carbon fibre instead of the DB11's pop-up one, and that combines with this low-set F1 style double diffuser and an enhanced version of the aeroblade technology we first saw on the DB11. With this, air is channeled through ducts that pass within the body before exiting via slots in the rear deck lid to create a jet of disrupted air that reduces rear lift. The result of all this aerodynamic effort is a considerable amount of drag-free downforce, the highest ever achieved by a series production Aston Martin, with 180 kilograms of it pressing the car to the tarmac at VMAX speeds. As for that name, Superleggera, well, there's something a little tongue-in-cheek about its use here. For one thing, the Italian meaning, super light, isn't especially apt for a car weighing in at 1,693 kilos. True, that's 72 kilos less than a comparable DB11, but it's 63 kilos more than this Aston's most obvious rival, the Ferrari 812 Superfast. You can't help thinking that Maranello's model's rather silly name prompted this car's equally convoluted branding. As stylist Marek Reichman remarks, if Ferrari can use an English word, superfast, then we can use an Italian one. So, this DBS is fully differentiated from lesser Aston Martins outside. Does the same hold true in the cabin? Not really. Essentially what's delivered here is an upgraded DB11, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That car set fresh standards for the quality of Aston Martin interior design, and this one enhances that formula with a well-judged package of embellishments. These gorgeous Caithness leather-trimmed, hip-hugging Sports Plus seats are perhaps the most obvious change, and once you get comfortable on them, you might begin to take in other cabin developments over that lesser model, like this squared-off race-style Sports Plus steering wheel with its longer full-length fixed paddle shifters, and the shapelier hooded sports instrument binnacle with its aggressively layered stitched top. Appropriately, DBS-specific trimming defaults towards carbon fibre rather than wood, and as you'd want, there's a very focused feel. But it's nothing like the race-style cockpit you get in a rival Ferrari 812 Superfast, that Maranello model unapologetically a track car, with its aggressive bucket seats, circuit harnesses and controls decked almost exclusively around the instrument binnacle. This Superleggera is different. It feels more opulent, it's easier to get comfortable, and you feel like you could really enjoy the kind of transcontinental distances that the Ferrari would struggle to cover with a true level of GT luxury. As with that Italian car, the cabin in this one has a few iffy finishes. The air vents feel particularly cheap, and there's some switchgear rather obviously sourced from cars designed for a much less exalted price point. But at least the fittings in question are generally borrowed from Mercedes rather than, as with the 812, Alphas and Fiats. The 8-inch display screen at the top of the centre stack is very obviously Stuttgart sourced too, though unfortunately it's that German brand's previous generation setup which will feel a little old-fashioned if you've tried more recent models from the three-pointed star. Still, this screen's difficult to fault in terms of its sharp graphics and slick operation. Everything you'd expect to find is incorporated, including voice activation, navigation, a DAB audio system, Bluetooth audio, and phone streaming, and a Wi-Fi hub. There's no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto style smartphone mirroring option, though. The display isn't touch sensitive, but you do get the kind of low-down rotary controller that you'd have to do without on that rival Ferrari, a feature that makes it so much easier to select what you want without taking your eyes off the road. And on a DBS, unlike on other Astons, you don't have to pay extra for this touchpad that sits above the circular dial, the pad surface offering gesture and character recognition. Anything this infotainment setup can't tell you will be covered off by the digital instrument binnacle you view through the squarical steering wheel. Appropriately, the display is dominated by a central rev counter, which has an inner ring that glows red when Sport mode is selected. Select Sport Plus and the outer ring glows red too. To the right of this central virtual dial sits a screen segment delivering various other selectable options, a trip computer, navigational instructions, radio and media settings, telephone info and service data. But there's no option to expand any of these readouts to fill more of the binnacle display, as would be the case in a more modern TFT instrument screen. As usual with the brand's modern models, ergonomic features you'll need to adjust to include these centre stack auto gear shift buttons, a familiar Aston touch, and the way the ventilation controls are rather crammed together just beneath. Here's another unusual feature, this powered lid that covers the transmission tunnel cubby. It's completely unnecessary and you'll love it. Once the immaculately stitched top has eased its way back, a pair of cup holder attachments are revealed, while further back you'll find an SD card slot, twin USB ports and a 12-volt socket. Otherwise though, there's less storage space than there really ought to be in a GT sports car. There's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, you don't get a glove box, and the door pockets are shallow and pretty useless, as is this small slot in front of the infotainment system rotary controller. You don't even get illumination for the vanity mirrors, though the sun visors are immaculately crafted and will be finished in either stitched leather or, as in this case, soft Alcantara. As for cabin quality, well, fit and finish is slightly better than that Ferrari serves up, and lovely touches like the intricately stitched roof lining, the carbon fibre door cards and the optional upholstery quilting are appropriate to a car priced at the cost of a northern semi-detached house. But Aston shouldn't congratulate itself too much. There's nothing like the bulletproof, hewn from granite feel that you'd get in a more affordable rival Bentley GT Continental Speed, which is the kind of standard this Gaydon brand ought to be aspiring to. All-round visibility isn't great either, which can be a bit intimidating on first acquaintance. It's difficult to see beyond that vast bonnet. There are thick windscreen pillars that can hamper your view at junctions, and your over-the-shoulder view out of the slim rear screen is predictably restricted. So you'll really need the standard parking sensors, park assist system and 360-degree camera setup. On the plus side, there's a much wider range of seat adjustment than Astons of this sort used to have. In keeping with this Superleggera's GT remit, you get a pair of rear seats. Now, you won't be expecting much, and you shouldn't. This car is, after all, only billed as a 2+2, which is usually industry standard for rear pews suitable only for kids or eunuchs. Still, it helps that the long doors open wide. As an adult, you've really got to be quite athletic to squeeze yourself back here. And once inside, there'll be almost no legroom at all, unless those ahead choose to be accommodating. Plus, as you can see, your head's likely to be brushing the stitched ceiling. You sit either side of an enormous speaker that sits in a central space that might be better used for an armrest or a ski hatch. And there's also an unnecessary vertical stitch strap on the seat facing that uncomfortably digs into your back. Still, the room on offer here will be fine for the small children, jackets and designer shopping bags it's primarily intended to accommodate. Isofix fastenings for child seats are provided, though you might struggle to get them in. Finally, let's take a look out back. Now, the 270-litre boot is the same size as that you get in a DB11, which makes it 50 litres smaller than that in a rival Ferrari 812 Superfast. Sensibility might dictate that on cross-continental journeys, you should fill this area with the optional bespoke 4-bag designer luggage kit so that you can maximise every inch of it. Bear in mind that with the alternative Volante convertible body style, luggage space falls to 224 litres, but Aston still reckons that's enough to allow you to take a couple of sets of golf clubs. Whatever your choice of variant, there are no tie-down points, nor do you get space beneath the floor or a fold-down rear seat backrest option. At least there's a low loading lip, and there are recessed areas to the left and right, plus some tie-down straps just inside the boot lip. Look up in here, and around the overhead light you'll find spray-painted metal and exposed electrical connectors in the top of the cargo bay, which isn't very premium. The biggest problem though, as with other Astons, is the way this area heats up in use, lightly sautéing your luggage as you drive. It shouldn't have to be like this in a modern GT, but maybe that's all part of the Aston experience. You'll need £225,000 to get yourself this DBS Superleggera Coupe, or at least that was the case at the time of this test in the autumn of 2019 anyway. The alternative Volante version of this car costs a cool £247,500, but as with this coupe, you'll be up to and beyond the £250,000 mark once you've added in various essential extras. Of course, you can pay more. At launch, for instance, Aston Martin made available a On Her Majesty's Secret Service special edition of the coupe version of this car, costing £300,007. You see what they did there? This limited run version celebrated half a century since the original On Her Majesty's Secret Service Bond film, in which George Lazenby used a 1969 DBS. The modern DBS Superleggera OHMSS used an olive green paint job like Lazenby's original and added a few other tweaks: a bespoke metal grille, OHMSS badging and red accents in the cockpit. Just 50 were made. But let's get back to this standard car. You'll need some Aston Martin range perspective to understand its positioning. This 715 horsepower coupe model's asking price represents a £50,000 premium over the brand's DB11 AMR, which uses a lower tuned 639 horsepower version of this car's 5.2 litre V12 engine. There's a £75,000 premium if you're comparing against a 510 horsepower V8 powered DB11, or an enormous £124,000 premium if you compare against Aston's entry model, the Vantage, which uses that same V8 engine. As for rivals to this DBS Superleggera, well, as we've been saying throughout this test, the most obvious one is Ferrari's 812 Superfast model. Obvious in the sense that in concept, that Ferrari is, like this Aston, a thoroughbred, large capacity, front-engined V12 Super GT with a 211 mile/hour top speed. Actually though, the two cars are pretty different. The Superfast is lighter, more accelerative, 75 horsepower, more powerful, and very much a track-focused machine. The DBS is more of a GT and responds with much greater torque. 900 newton meters plays 718 newton meters, and greater refinement. Plus, the Aston is on offer at a £36,000 lower asking price. Should that be significant for you? Probably won't be. Is there anything else you could look at? Well, there aren't too many similarly configured exclusive V12 sports coupe or sports car models that fit the bill. The Mercedes-AMG S65 coupe is no longer offered here, and the Rolls-Royce Wraith isn't focused enough. A Bentley Continental GT Speed V12 is a closer match, but that's cruisier than a DBS and is really more of a DB11 AMR rival. A Ferrari GT C4 Lusso V12 might arguably be the nearest alternative to what's on offer here, but that costs £15,000 more and is way heavier than this DBS because of its four-wheel drive system. If you switch your attention to something slightly more track-orientated and look at V8 super sports cars at about the £200,000 mark, then you might consider either a McLaren 720S or a Ferrari 488 GTB, both of which are closer to a DBS in terms of power. But these aren't really GT models in the sense that ideally you wouldn't want either of them to be your everyday car, nor would you choose either for something like a transcontinental trip. This Superleggera, in contrast, would be fine with either scenario. If, having considered all of this, you decide that there's nothing quite like a DBS Superleggera and you're looking to acquire one, then you're going to be interested to know just how generous Aston Martin has been with the standard specification. Well, let's see. Huge 21-inch wheels shod with bespoke Pirelli P0 rubber feature, with the standard rim style being a silver forged Y-spoke design. Aston also includes carbon ceramic brake discs with diameters of 410mm at the front and 360mm at the rear. You don't get a quick-shifting dual-clutch auto gearbox like that fitted to the Ferrari 812 Superfast. The British brand instead preferring an uprated version of the rear mid-mounted ZF 8-speed torque converter auto you'll find on the DB11. Nor do you get a four-wheel drive system like that you'd find on a rival Ferrari GTC 4. Instead, PTC or positive torque control, TC or traction control, and DTV, dynamic torque vectoring, all combine to get all those brake horses to the tarmac. Other driver-orientated features include Skyhook, adaptive damping and a driving mode system, both setups offering selectable GT, Sport and Sport Plus settings. Other key DBS inclusions run to keyless entry, a noise-insulated laminated windscreen, power folding heated mirrors, auto headlamps and wipers, and an alarm immobiliser. Standard front and rear parking sensors and an auto park assist system are almost essential to steer you into spaces, given the slightly limited interior visibility. Inside, there are superbly comfortable Sports Plus front seats that feature a DBS embroidered headrest logo, stitched Caithness leather upholstery, heating and powered operation with memory functions. Black leather is used for cabin inlays and for the squared-off race-style steering wheel, which is heated, plus a dark chrome interior jewellery pack coats many of the interior elements in that colour. The finishing touch is what Aston calls an Alcantara environment, which sees that material covering the A-pillars and the stitched roof lining. There's also automatic temperature control, a powered central armrest, and an electrically powered steering column with an up and away function that'll make it easier to get in and out. As usual in an Aston Martin, there's a customisable TFT digital screen replacing the conventional instrument binnacle dials, and a further Mercedes-sourced 8-inch centre dash LCD screen activated by voice or a rotary control, enabling you to access a whole range of standard features. There's also a touchpad offering character recognition, multi-touch and gesture support. Media inclusions run to navigation, a DAB tuner, Bluetooth audio and phone streaming, a 360-degree surround view camera setup and a Wi-Fi hub. Plus, there's a 700-watt Aston Martin premium audio system with Dolby Pro Logic sound. What's missing is an Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring option, but iPod and iPhones can be easily integrated into this infotainment package. Other standard cabin features include cruise control with a speed limiter, dual zone climate control and a trip computer. On to options. Now, Aston Martin has its own bespoke queue service to help customers tailor their cars to their own specific wishes. But we're going to assume here that you'll be making a lot of the decisions yourself. That is, after all, part of the pleasure of buying such an exclusive sports car. Naturally, paint colour is key. This car's finished in intense blue, but there are of course many other shades available through the brand's so-called contemporary AML paint palette. In getting the exterior of your chosen DBS model finished to your taste, a good starting point may well be one of the various designer specifications created by Aston Martin's in-house design team. We've got distilled energy here. You might, though, prefer to make all the individual stylistic decisions yourself, in which case a lot of very pleasant decisions await you. Take the roof. If you don't want it body-coloured like this, should it come trimmed in 2x2 twin carbon fibre or in gloss black? The same finishes are available for the mirror caps and the roof strakes. Here, as you can see, they're both painted gloss black. The side louvers come only in carbon fibre or gloss black. The big 21-inch wheels can be had in a choice of 3 different 10 twin-spoke forged rim designs available in silver or, as in this case, black. Or you could go for a set of lightweight twin-spoke forged rims with gloss or textured black finishes. Gloss or satin carbon fibre wheel caps can be added. Either way, through the wheel spokes, you glimpse ceramic discs in place of the DB11 steel ones, with calipers that, as an alternative to the standard dark anodised finish, can be painted either red, grey, yellow, or, as in this case, black. You can even have Aston Martin branded tyre valve caps. What else? Well, your Superleggera will come with a special carbon fibre exterior pack, but you'll have to choose whether you want it with a gloss or a gloss black tinted finish. The bonnet, louver and nostrils can be specified in either grained black mesh or a 2x2 twill carbon fibre, and the door handles can also be optionally had with that carbon fibre coating. The tail lamps can have smoked lenses. You can have carbon trimming on the badging if you don't want the standard black enamel finish. And around the engine, you can have a carbon fibre cam cover, a gold underbonnet pack, or a combination of the two. For the interior, there are 4 overall cabin trimming choices. Aston calls them environments. We like the standard Alcantara environment, but you can also have 3 more heavily leather orientated environment options. Possibly monotone, where everything's one dark colour, or there's Q-split, which introduces light shade trimming strips into the upholstery and the door cards. And finally, duotone, where lighter shades are far more prevalent. A wide range of leather environment colours are available. The upholstery can be perforated, and if you like, either triaxle or geode quilting can be added too. You can also have either the DBS logo or the Aston Martin wings branding embroidered or embossed onto the seats. And the headliner can be had either with 2 different finishes of Alcantara or with a stitched leather finish to match the upholstery. If you don't like the standard cabin dark chrome jewellery pack, then alternative satin silver or 2x2 twill carbon fibre finishes are available. Trim inlays are available in piano black, dyed Tamo open pore, or 2 kinds of carbon fibre, and the front seat backs can be either matched to the inlay finish you've chosen or simply trimmed in leather. There are various steering wheel finishes which use either Alcantara or black or colour-keyed stitched leather. There's a wide range of colours for the carpets in the cabin and the boot. Heavy pile floor mats are available. You can have personalised door sill plaques or carbon fibre tread plates, and there are 6 different seatbelt colours. Other extras include privacy glass and a full titanium exhaust, and cooled ventilation and powered seat bolster adjustments for the seats. Plus, you're very likely to want the 1000-watt Bang & Olufsen Beosound audio upgrade package, the highlight of which is dash-top mounted tweeters that rise up when the stereo is switched on. We'd want the optional Cat 5 tracking system too. Practical options include various fitted car covers, a garage door opener, a key pouch, a first aid kit, snow chains, and a battery conditioner that allows you to monitor your car's battery voltage. You might like the optional built-in umbrella and holder. And we definitely want the tailored 4-piece luggage set designed to maximise boot space. The bags can even be matched to the interior finish you've chosen. A performance driving course could be of interest too. Enough with options. What about DBS Superleggera safety provision? Well, as you'd expect, all the basics are in place, but only the basics. Aston Martin is keen to stress that this car's aluminium chassis is extremely strong. And of course, there are twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus tyre pressure monitoring and the usual electronic systems, ABS braking with emergency brake assist for panic stops, and a dynamic stability control set up with an interim setting that allows a little extra tail slip, but will help you out in extremis. Isofix child seat attachments are fitted to the back seats, and blind spot assist is fitted to alert you if you're about to pull out into the path of another vehicle. We normally start this section with a review of economy and emissions, but of course anyone comfortable with blowing $250,000 on a super sports car is unlikely to be overly concerned with trifling issues of that sort. The big ticket cost with cars at this kind of exalted price point isn't frugality but depreciation. So if you like the idea of a Superleggera, you'll be pleased to hear that this Aston Martin fares reasonably here. Independent experts CAP reckon that over a 3-year or 36,000 mile ownership period, this DBS will retain 56% of its original value. To give you some class perspective, the figure for Ferrari's rival 812 Superfast is 60%. Over a more typical 3-year or 15,000 mile ownership tenure, CAP reckons this Aston's residual figure will be 63%. If for some reason you are interested in the fuel and emissions stats, we'll tell you that in coupe form, this car manages a 22.9 mpg combined cycle WLTP figure with NEDC rated emissions of 285 grams per kilometre. For the Volante version, the equivalent figures are 20.1 mpg and 295 grams per kilometre. The fixed top variant showing is a little down on the readings you get from basically the same Aston V12 engine in a DB11 AMR, which are 24.8 mpg and 265 grams per kilometre, but it's way better than the stats you'll get from that Ferrari 812 Superfast, 19 mpg and 340 grams per kilometre. The Ferrari won't feel less economical though, because it has a larger 92-litre fuel tank. That of this DBS is just 78 litres in size. In terms of eco-friendliness, you might think that you could hardly annoy the Greenpeace set more if your choice of car had a whale harpooning gun strapped to the bonnet. Yet, should you be inveigled into a conversation with a bearded type, you could point out that in some ways, this DBS is very green indeed. There's no wasteful recycling needed here because due to its build, no recycling is needed. There's nothing to rust and nothing to decay. So look after your Aston and it will still be thrilling people in 50 years' time. Insurance is predictably a top-of-the-shop Group 50E, and servicing will be needed every year or every 10,000 miles, whichever comes first. Dealership visits, of course, won't be cheap, but there shouldn't be a need for unnecessary ones these days. The old Aston adage that customers could find out what was wrong, saving the brand a lot of development time, bother and expense, has thankfully long been abandoned. There's a 3-year unlimited mileage warranty, and these days the asking price includes 5 years of maintenance too. Obviously, hard use will result in heavy brake and tyre wear, and on the subject of tyres, the bespoke Pirelli P0 rubber will be awesomely expensive to replace, so bear that in mind before you go track day showboating. By almost every measurement, the DBS Superleggera is a very special sports car, and in almost every way it's worthy of its positioning as a flagship Aston Martin model. Though on paper, comparisons to the Ferrari 812 Superfast seem evident, in practice the Superleggera is a rather different car, less track-focused to be sure, but also more road-orientated and easier to live with. Unless you've regular access to circuit tarmac, it is, in our estimation anyway, a better choice than its Maranello rival. And an easier car to get to grips with, agile and connected without being highly strung and oversensitive. You'd have to be an experienced driver to get the most out of this DBS, but you wouldn't have to be a real expert, and that's not the case with that rival Ferrari. Aston's chassis supremo Matt Becker says he's still blown away by the speed of this car whenever he drives it, and we can understand that. It's very, very fast. But then so is a lesser DB11 AMR, and that car delivers pretty much the same engine and will save you around £50,000. Sure, this Superleggera model looks more dynamic, and for lottery winners there's the advantage that it can also be had in Volante form, but there'll be some who'll think that its engineering CV and its cabin finishing aren't quite as distinct from the DB11 formula as perhaps they should be. If you've got nearly $250,000 to spend on a super sports car, you don't want to be reminded so directly of one costing a mere £150,000. We can understand that. Actually though, in testing this Superleggera, we found ourselves more reminded of the last distinct Aston design we tried, the brand's entry-level Vantage model. Perhaps that's no coincidence. Both cars were tuned from scratch by Becker, unlike the DB11, and in many ways, this DBS is indeed very much a Vantage on steroids. Accessible, yet addictive. Oh, ultimately, what's important here is that the DBS formula is a traditionally Aston Martin one, which is rather reassuring in an era in which the brand is diversifying into uncharted territory like hybrid technology, mid-engine motoring and SUVs. Now, engineering like that is needed if the company's future is to be sustainable, but the marque can't afford to forget its heritage in producing the kind of classic Super GT that small boys can dream about and wealthy enthusiasts can aspire to. So, we welcome the Superleggera. There's nothing quite like it.